You wake up in a life that feels familiar, different faces, same arguments, different jobs, same emptiness. You keep wondering, why does this keep happening to me? What if it's not the world repeating? Well, what if it's you? Inside the quantum field, memory doesn't vanish, it vibrates. Every emotion you've buried still hums like a frequency in the background, waiting to be heard. Until it is, you're caught in a loop and the quantum memory echo, because in this universe, nothing unresolved disappears, it just finds another way to return. You wake up wondering why this feeling follows you everywhere. Not the feeling itself, and that would be too simple, too clean. It's the texture of the feeling, the particular weight of it settling into your chest like sediment in still water. The same weight that arrived when you were 17 and your first love looked through you as if you were already a memory. The same weight that pressed down when you sat in that fluorescent lit office, listening to words that sounded like opportunity but felt like a cage. The same weight now, as you scroll through messages from people who care about you, yet somehow you remain unreachable, even to yourself. They call it déjà vu when moments repeat themselves in mysterious ways, when the present moment seems to fold back on itself like origami made of time. But what they don't tell you is that life itself can become one long déjà vu, a spiraling repetition, not of moments, but of feelings, of patterns, of the particular way your heart constricts when faced with the same emotional geography, painted in different colours but essentially unchanged. Consider your last 3 relationships. Strip away the names, the faces, the particular circumstances. What remains? The fighting, the silence, the way you found yourself saying the same words, feeling the same frustrations, watching the same movie play out with different actors? Or perhaps it's work, how each new position promised something different. Yet 6 months in, you're having the same conversation with yourself about meaning, about purpose, about why you feel like you're sleepwalking through the very life you thought you wanted. There's a peculiar mathematics to emotional repetition. It's not random, it's not coincidence. There's an algorithm running beneath the surface of your conscious choices, a program written in a language you don't remember learning. This algorithm doesn't care about your rational mind's carefully constructed plans. It doesn't respond to willpower or positive thinking or the vision board on your refrigerator. It operates from a deeper place where your nervous system keeps meticulous records of every wound, every joy, every moment of terror and wonder that shaped the architecture of who you became. The repetition announces itself in small ways at first. You notice you always seem to attract the same type of friend, the one who needs saving or the one who disappears when you need saving. You realize your living spaces, no matter how different the city or the budget, somehow always feel the same, either too crowded with things that don't matter or too empty of things that do. You observe, with growing unease, that your relationship with money repeats the same cycle. Abundance followed by scarcity, security followed by chaos, as if your nervous system can only tolerate so much ease before it must create familiar turbulence. But the most unsettling repetitions are the ones that happen inside you, the way your confidence crumbles at the exact moment opportunity presents itself, the way joy feels dangerous, as if happiness were a debt you'll eventually have to pay with interest, the way love feels like a setup for disappointment, no matter how many times you promise yourself this time will be different. These internal patterns run so deep they feel like laws of physics, immutable facts about the nature of your existence. You begin to suspect that you're not living so much as you're being lived by something larger than your conscious intention, something that knows which buttons to push, which triggers to activate, which scenarios will reliably produce the familiar cocktail of emotions you've been drinking your entire adult life. This something speaks in the language of attraction and repulsion, drawing you towards certain people and pushing you away from others with a precision that would be impressive if it weren't so maddening. The recognition dawns slowly, like watching the sun rise through thick fog. You're not unlucky. You're not broken. You're not cursed by cruel cosmic forces. You're caught in a loop. A sophisticated, intelligent, perfectly calibrated loop that your own system has created to keep you safely within the boundaries of the known, even when the known is killing you slowly, one repeated pattern at a time. And here's what makes it beautiful and terrible at once. The loop isn't punishment. It's protection. It's your nervous system's attempt to master something that once felt unmanageable. It's your unconscious mind's way of saying, I know this territory. I can survive this. I have evidence. But what protected you once may be imprisoning you now. What helped you survive childhood may be preventing you from fully living adulthood. The question hovering at the edge of your awareness, the one you're not quite ready to ask but can't stop thinking about, is this. What if these patterns aren't happening to you? What if, at some level deeper than thought, deeper than choice, deeper than consciousness itself, they're happening through you? What if your very presence in the world is broadcasting a signal and life is simply responding to that signal with mathematical precision? The loop is not your enemy. The loop is your teacher. But first, you must learn to see it clearly. Look closely at the people who populate your emotional landscape. Not the casual acquaintances or the grocery store clerks, but the ones who matter. The ones who have the power to lift you or devastate you, sometimes within the span of a single conversation. Notice something curious. They're playing roles in a play you don't remember writing. Yet somehow each actor knows their lines perfectly. There's your mother, or perhaps the echo of your mother, in every woman who's ever made you feel both cherished and criticized in the same breath. There's your father, or his absence, reflected in every authority figure who has the power to approve or disappoint. There's your first heartbreak, showing up again and again in different bodies, but with the same capacity to make you feel like you're not quite enough, or perhaps too much. This isn't coincidence. This isn't even psychology in the way you've been taught to understand it. This is pattern recognition at the level of energy, at the level of resonance. Your nervous system, that exquisitely sensitive instrument that's been recording and categorizing every significant interaction since before you had words for them, has become a kind of emotional GPS. It navigates you toward the familiar, even when the familiar is uncomfortable, because the familiar is known. And the known, however painful, feels safer than the unknown. Think about the last time you felt truly seen and understood. How long did it take before you found a way to create distance? How long before you discovered something wrong with that person, or convinced yourself they were seeing something in you that wasn't really there? The pattern might be subtle, a gradual cooling, a convenient conflict, a sudden obsession with their flaws, or it might be dramatic, self-sabotage so spectacular it ensures you'll never have to risk that level of intimacy again. The mirror pattern reveals itself most clearly in our closest relationships because intimacy amplifies everything. The person you love becomes a canvas onto which your unconscious mind projects every unresolved relationship from your past. They carry the weight of your father's approval, your mother's criticism, your siblings' competition, your first teacher's praise or dismissal. They become not just themselves, but a representative of everyone who has ever had the power to make you feel safe or threatened. And here's where it gets interesting. They're doing the same thing to you. You're not just you in their eyes. You're their mother's unpredictability, their father's anger, their ex-partner's betrayal. You're standing in a hall of mirrors, each reflection carrying the emotional charge of decades of unfinished business. No wonder intimate relationships feel so intense, so charged with meaning that seems to exceed the actual circumstances. You're not just navigating the present moment. You're navigating the accumulated emotional history of two nervous systems trying to resolve old business through new people. The workplace mirrors different patterns, but with equal precision. There's the boss who reminds you exactly why you learned to be invisible as a child. There's the colleague whose casual confidence triggers every memory of feeling overlooked or undervalued. There's the project that seems like an opportunity until it becomes a stage for playing out your relationship with failure, with success, with the particular way your nervous system learned to handle visibility. You might notice that you keep attracting the same type of crisis, financial emergencies that require you to rescue or be rescued, health scares that put you in the position of caregiving or care receiving, dramatic conflicts that cast you as the hero, the victim, or the villain, but always in the same role, as if you've been typecast in the movie of your own life. The ancient wisdom traditions called this karma, but they understood karma not as punishment for past life sins, but as the natural consequence of unresolved emotional energy-seeking resolution. Modern neuroscience calls it implicit memory, the way our nervous system stores emotional experiences below the threshold of conscious recall. Yet these stored experiences continue to influence our perceptions, our choices, our reactions to current situations. But there's something even more fundamental at work here, something that bridges the gap between ancient wisdom and quantum understanding. Life doesn't repeat what you've learned. Life repeats what you've avoided. The very experiences you've organized your life around not having, those are the experiences that will find you again and again, wearing different costumes but carrying the same emotional signature. If you learned early that love equals loss, you'll unconsciously create situations where love leads to loss, Not because you're masochistic, but because your nervous system is trying to master that original experience. If you learned that success is dangerous, that visibility leads to attack, that prosperity creates envy, that achieving your dreams will somehow cost you the love of those who couldn't achieve theirs, then you'll find ingenious ways to sabotage yourself at the moment of breakthrough. The mirror pattern isn't cruel, it's intelligent. It's your system's way of bringing what was unconscious into consciousness, of giving you another chance to complete what was left incomplete. But completion requires recognition, and recognition requires the courage to see that you're not just experiencing life, you're creating it, moment by moment, choice by choice, through the invisible broadcast of your unresolved emotional frequencies. Every person in your life is both themselves and a mirror. What you see reflected may be more about you than about them. Your brain is running code you didn't write, executing programs installed before you had the cognitive capacity to read the terms of service. These programs, formed in the crucible of your earliest experiences, don't distinguish between past and present, between what happened then and what's happening now. They operate with the elegant simplicity of binary logic, safe or dangerous, familiar or foreign, approach or avoid. Neuroscientists have mapped the pathways, how trauma and joy alike carve neural highways that become the default routes for processing similar experiences. But there's something they're just beginning to understand, something that bridges neuroscience and quantum physics in ways that would have seemed like science fiction just decades ago. The brain isn't just a biological computer processing individual experience. It's an antenna, both receiving and transmitting information across the vast field of interconnected consciousness. Consider how your emotional state affects everyone around you, even when you say nothing. How walking into a room where two people have been fighting feels immediately uncomfortable, even if they're now sitting in silence. How certain people's presence calms your nervous system while others' presence activates your fight or flight response within seconds. You're not reading body language or micro-expressions, you're reading the energetic signature of their emotional state. This is where the algorithm becomes quantum. Your unresolved emotional states don't just influence your neural pathways, they create what quantum physicists might call attractor fields in the fabric of your experience. These fields have a gravitational pull, drawing into your reality the people, situations, and circumstances that match their frequency. It's not metaphor, it's mechanics. Think of it this way. You walk into a party carrying the unresolved frequency of abandonment. Your nervous system, trained by years of emotional experience, scans the room, not for conscious compatibility, but for energetic familiarity. Within minutes, you're drawn to the person whose own nervous system carries the complementary frequency, perhaps the frequency of engulfment and withdrawal. Neither of you understands why you're attracted to each other. You tell yourselves it's chemistry or shared interests, or physical attraction. But beneath the surface, your nervous systems have recognized each other as perfect co-conspirators in recreating the familiar dance of approach and avoidance that both of you learned as children. The algorithm is remarkably sophisticated. It doesn't just attract the same type of person, it attracts the exact type of experience your nervous system needs to either resolve or reinforce its core programming. If your foundational experience taught you that love requires sacrifice of self, you'll find yourself repeatedly in relationships where giving more and more of yourself away feels like love, until there's nothing left to give. If your foundational experience taught you that trust leads to betrayal, you'll unconsciously test every relationship until you find the breaking point, gathering evidence that trust is indeed dangerous. But here's what makes this algorithm so fascinating. It's not trying to torture you, it's trying to heal you. Each repetition is an opportunity for resolution, a chance to respond differently to the same energetic trigger. The problem is that most of us don't recognize the pattern until we've repeated it dozens or hundreds of times. We're too close to see the algorithm running, too embedded in the experience to recognize that we're not victims of circumstance, but co-creators of a remarkably consistent reality. The quantum field, as modern physics understands it, is pure potential until observation collapses it into specific reality. But what determines which reality emerges from infinite possibility? Consciousness, expectation, the vibrational frequency of the observer. Your emotional state isn't just your internal experience, it's your vote in the quantum democracy of reality creation. Fear votes for more experiences that confirm danger. Love votes for more experiences that confirm connection. Unresolved grief votes for more experiences of loss, Not because grief wants to suffer, but because grief wants to be seen, to be honoured, to be allowed to complete its natural cycle. This is why positive thinking alone doesn't work. You can't think your way out of an emotional algorithm. The nervous system doesn't speak the language of thoughts. It speaks the language of sensation, of felt experience, of nervous system states. You can affirm abundance all day long, but if your nervous system carries the frequency of scarcity, if it learned early that resources are limited and love is conditional, then abundance will feel dangerous, like something that can be taken away. You'll unconsciously sabotage it to return to the familiar frequency of not enough, because not enough feels like home. The algorithm reveals itself differently for everyone, but it always reveals itself through patterns. Pay attention to the stories you tell about why things don't work out. Pay attention to the timing of your self-sabotage. Pay attention to the moment when opportunity turns into obligation, when connection turns into overwhelm, when success starts to feel like a burden rather than a blessing. These moments of transformation aren't random, Herbal. They're all the algorithm executing its core programming. Understanding this changes everything. It means you're not broken, you're not cursed, you're not doomed to repeat the patterns forever. It means you're running sophisticated software that once served you perfectly, but now needs updating. It means that the very patterns that seem to be working against you are actually attempting to work for you. They're just using outdated information about what safety and survival require. The first step in updating the algorithm is recognizing that it could. The second step is developing the capacity to observe it without being consumed by it. This requires what the ancient traditions called witness consciousness, the ability to watch your own patterns with curiosity rather than judgment, with fascination rather than frustration. From this place of witnessing, something remarkable becomes possible. Choice. Not the illusion of choice that your thinking mind believes it has, but the deep choice that comes from conscious collaboration with your own nervous system. You're not broken. You're running perfect software with outdated programming. The algorithm can be updated. Imagine dropping a stone into perfectly still water. The ripples move outward in concentric circles, carrying the energy of that initial impact far beyond the point of contact. Now, imagine that the water is not water, but the quantum field of consciousness itself, and the stone is not a stone, but an unresolved emotional experience. The ripples don't fade with distance. They reverberate through time, creating interference patterns that shape every subsequent experience. This is the echo chamber of consciousness, the way a single unresolved emotional frequency can reverberate through years or decades of experience, creating seemingly unrelated events that all carry the same energetic signature. You might experience it as a series of betrayals by people who seem completely different from each other, or as a pattern of opportunities that appear promising but somehow always dissolve at the crucial moment, or as a particular flavour of loneliness that follows you, from relationship to relationship, city to city, career to career. The echo chamber operates according to the principle of resonance. Just as a tuning fork will cause another tuning fork of the same frequency to vibrate sympathetically, your unresolved emotional states attract experiences that vibrate at the same frequency. This isn't mystical thinking. It's basic physics applied to the field of consciousness. Every emotion has a vibrational frequency, and that frequency acts as a magnet, drawing to you the people and circumstances that match its resonance. Consider Sarah, who carries the unresolved frequency of her father's emotional absence. He was physically present but emotionally unavailable, lost in his own struggles with depression and work addiction. Sarah learned to equate love with longing, intimacy with unreachability. Now, at 35, she finds herself repeatedly attracted to partners who are emotionally unavailable in different ways. The musician too absorbed in his art to fully connect, the executive too consumed by ambition to be present, the activist too focused on saving the world to notice her needs. Each relationship feels different on the surface, but the emotional signature is identical. Love equals longing for someone who cannot fully meet you. The echo chamber doesn't distinguish between different people or circumstances, it only recognizes frequency. Sarah's nervous system has learned to interpret emotional unavailability as love, so emotional unavailability feels like home. Availability, on the other hand, feels foreign, uncomfortable, even dangerous. When someone does show up consistently present and emotionally open, Sarah's nervous system interprets this as wrong somehow, not love, and she finds reasons to create distance or end the relationship. Or consider Michael, whose early experience taught him that his needs were too much, that his emotional intensity overwhelmed the adults in his life. He learned to make himself smaller, to manage everyone else's comfort above his own. Now his career reflects this pattern perfectly. He's always the one working late, taking on extra projects, saying yes when he means no. He tells himself he's being helpful, being a team player. But what he's really doing is playing out the same dynamic he learned as a child, making himself invaluable by making himself invisible. The echo chamber can span generations. The trauma your grandfather never processed from the war, the grief your grandmother never allowed herself to feel when she lost her first child, the rage your mother never expressed about her own mother's criticism, all of this can reverberate through the family system, creating patterns that seem to have no logical origin. You find yourself afraid of success for reasons you can't explain, or unable to trust your own judgment despite evidence of your competence, or carrying a sadness that feels older than your own life. This is what some traditions call ancestral patterns or karmic inheritance. Not because you're being punished for someone else's choices, but because consciousness is far more interconnected than we've been taught to believe. The family nervous system, like any system, seeks balance. When one generation cannot process certain emotions, those emotions don't disappear. They get passed down to the next generation to be processed, resolved, or passed down again. But the echo chamber isn't only about family patterns. It operates in every area of life because consciousness itself is holographic. Every part contains the whole. Your relationship with money echoes your relationship with love, which echoes your relationship with power, which echoes your relationship with your own creative expression. The same core frequencies play out across all domains of experience because they're not really separate domains, they're different facets of the same underlying reality. This explains why changing one area of your life often spontaneously improves others. When you finally learn to set boundaries in your intimate relationships, you suddenly find yourself setting boundaries at work. When you heal your relationship with your body, your relationship with money shifts. When you stop abandoning yourself for others' approval, you stop attracting people who abandon you. The echo chamber works both ways. Resolution in one area creates ripples of resolution throughout the entire system. The challenge is that the echo chamber creates the illusion that these patterns are inevitable, that this is just how life is for you, that you're somehow different from people who seem to navigate relationships or money or success with ease. You might tell yourself you're unlucky, or that you have bad judgment, or that you're somehow fundamentally flawed. But these stories miss the deeper truth. You're not experiencing random difficulties. You're experiencing the logical consequences of unresolved emotional frequencies seeking resolution. And here's what's beautiful about understanding the echo chamber. It reveals that every challenging experience is actually an invitation. Every repetitive pattern is your consciousness offering you another opportunity to resolve what was left incomplete. The universe isn't punishing you with the same painful experiences. It's giving you multiple chances to heal what needs healing, to complete what needs completing, to transform what needs transforming. The key is learning to recognize the echo beneath the surface circumstances. When you can see that this current heartbreak carries the same frequency as the heartbreak you experienced at 15, you're no longer trapped in the story of what this particular person did or didn't do. You're free to respond to the deeper frequency, to offer healing, to the part of you that learned heartbreak was inevitable, that love was dangerous, that opening your heart was a setup for pain. The echo creates the experience. Change the frequency, and the echo transforms. Beneath the surface chaos of your life, the endless to-do lists, the relationship dramas, the career uncertainties, the financial pressures, there's a signal broadcasting. It's been broadcasting since before you had language to describe it, since before you had concepts to understand it. This signal carries information from your deepest self about what wants to be healed, what wants to be expressed, what wants to be resolved and transformed. Most people live their entire lives never learning to distinguish between the signal and the noise. They get caught up in the surface drama, thinking that fixing the external circumstances will finally bring peace. They change jobs, change partners, change cities, change therapists, change everything except the frequency they're broadcasting. And so the same patterns follow them wherever they go, like a radio station that plays the same song on repeat, even when you change the volume or upgrade the speakers. The signal is encoded in your attractions and repulsions, in the people who fascinate you and the people who irritate you, in the dreams that call to you and the fears that stop you. It's written in the language of nervous system responses. the way your body contracts around certain possibilities and expands around others, the way certain conversations energize you while others drain you, the way certain environments feel like home while others feel like exile. Learning to read this signal requires a different kind of intelligence than what you learned in school. It requires what we might call embodied intelligence, the ability to feel your way toward truth rather than thinking your way toward it. Your body knows things your mind hasn't figured out yet. Your nervous system can detect authenticity and deception, safety and danger, alignment and misalignment with extraordinary precision. But you have to learn to trust these subtle signals over the louder voice of cultural conditioning. The signal often comes disguised as problems. The recurring conflict with your boss might be trying to teach you about sovereignty and self-advocacy. The pattern of attracting needy friends might be revealing your own discomfort with receiving care. The way money flows in and out of your life might be showing you exactly where you don't yet trust your own worth. What looks like self-sabotage from the outside might actually be your system's intelligent attempt to protect you from something your conscious mind thinks it wants, but your deeper wisdom knows isn't right for you yet. This is where the understanding becomes both humbling and liberating. You realize that you've been fighting against your own intelligence, dismissing signals that were actually trying to guide you towards something more authentic, more aligned, more truly nourishing than what your conditioned mind thought it wanted. The resistance you've been judging as weakness or self-sabotage might actually be wisdom disguised as opposition. Consider the job you keep saying you want but somehow never quite get, or the relationship you keep saying you're ready for but somehow never quite maintain. Instead of asking, "What's wrong with me that I can't make this work?" try asking, "What is my deeper intelligence trying to protect me from or guide me toward?" The answer might surprise you. Maybe the job would require you to compromise your values in ways you haven't fully acknowledged. Maybe the relationship would require you to abandon yourself in patterns you're finally ready to outgrow. The signal beneath the noise is not punishment, it's guidance, but it's guidance that operates according to the laws of resonance and frequency rather than the laws of logic and linear planning. It's guiding you not toward what you think you should want, but toward what your soul actually wants. And sometimes what your soul wants requires you to outgrow the identity you've been carrying, the story you've been telling about who you are and what's possible for you. This is why the patterns repeat until they're understood. They're not just random repetitions, they're curriculum. Each iteration offers more information about the signal you're broadcasting and the frequency you're embodying. Each repetition is an opportunity to go deeper, to listen more carefully, to respond with greater consciousness and less reactivity. The goal isn't to stop the patterns through force or willpower, but to understand them so completely that they naturally transform. As you begin to tune into the signal beneath the noise, something remarkable happens. You start making choices from a deeper place, a place that's connected to your authentic nature, rather than your conditioned responses. You begin to trust the timing of your life, even when it doesn't match your mental timeline. You start recognizing that delays and obstacles might be perfectly orchestrated opportunities to develop capacities you'll need for what's coming next. The signal is always broadcasting information about your next level of growth, your next level of healing, your next level of authentic expression. But it speaks in a language that's older than words, deeper than thoughts. It speaks in the language of sensation and intuition, of dreams and synchronicities, of attractions and resistances that seem to have nothing to do with logic, but everything to do with the deeper intelligence that's orchestrating your evolution. This intelligence isn't separate from you. It is you, at a level deeper than personality, deeper than learned identity, deeper than the roles you play in the world. It's the you that existed before conditioning, the you that will remain after all the stories fall away. And it's been trying to get your attention through every pattern, every repetition, every seemingly random experience that has shaped your life. The invitation now is to start listening, not with your mind, which will try to analyze and categorize and make meaning too quickly, but with your whole being. To approach your own patterns with the curiosity of a scientist and the compassion of a loving parent. To recognize that what you've been calling your problems might actually be your most sophisticated teachers, and what you've been calling your failures might actually be your most important course corrections. It's not punishment, it's resonance. It's not random, it's purposeful. It's not happening to you. It's happening through you, for you, as you. And once you truly understand this, everything changes. Not because your external circumstances magically transform, but because your relationship to those circumstances undergoes a fundamental shift. You stop being a victim of your patterns and start being a conscious collaborator in your own evolution. The signal has been calling you home to yourself all along. The only question is, are you ready to listen? In 1935, Einstein called it spooky action at a distance, the way two particles, once connected, remain mysteriously linked across any distance, instantly responding to changes in each other's state. He thought it was impossible, a flaw in quantum theory. But decades of experiments have proven what Einstein couldn't accept. Entanglement is real. Particles that have interacted maintain an invisible connection that transcends space and time, their fates forever intertwined by a single moment of contact. What if emotional experiences operate by the same principles? What if every significant moment, every trauma, every joy, every heartbreak, every moment of transcendence creates quantum entanglements that persist across time, linking you to those experiences regardless of how many years have passed, how much therapy you've done, how far you've travelled from where it all began, and you're entangled with your unhealed moments. That instant when you were 7 and realised your parents' marriage was breaking apart, you're still connected to that child's terror and confusion. The moment at 15 when your first love chose someone else. You remain entangled with that teenager's conviction that love means abandonment. The day you failed at something that mattered deeply to you, you're still linked to that adult's shame and self-doubt. In quantum mechanics, entangled particles exist in what physicists call a superposition, multiple states simultaneously until observation collapses them into a single reality. Your emotional entanglements work similarly, existing in a superposition of resolved and unresolved until something in your present experience observes them back into active reality. This is why you can be 40 years old and suddenly feel exactly like you did at 8, when your teacher called you stupid in front of the class. It's not a memory surfacing, it's an entangled emotional state collapsing from potential into experience. The 40-year-old professional and the 8-year-old child exist simultaneously in the quantum field of your consciousness until some trigger, a criticism, a look, tone of voice, causes that superposition to collapse into the familiar experience of shame and inadequacy. But here's where it gets fascinating. Entanglement works both ways. Just as unresolved experiences can suddenly become present, resolution in the present can instantly heal the past. When you finally learn to respond to criticism with curiosity instead of shame, you're not just changing your current experience, you're changing the frequency of every entangled moment of shame you've ever experienced. The 8-year-old, the 15-year-old, the 25-year-old who felt inadequate, they all receive the gift of your present moment healing. Consider the phenomenon of emotional resonance. How being around certain people instantly activates specific emotional states in you. Your nervous system isn't just responding to their current behaviour, it's recognizing the frequency they're broadcasting and checking its quantum entanglement database for your matches. When someone carries the same emotional signature as your critical father or your abandoning mother, your entangled emotions collapse from potential into experience, and suddenly you're reacting not to who they are, but to who they remind your nervous system of. This is why healing happens in layers, why you can think you've resolved something only to have it resurface years later. You haven't failed at healing, you've encountered another aspect of the entanglement. Each layer of resolution changes the frequency of the entire entangled system, but it takes time for all the quantum connections to recalibrate to the new frequency. Some entanglements run so deep they touch not just your personal history, but your ancestral patterns, your collective unconscious, your species' emotional evolution. The beautiful truth about emotional entanglement is that it reveals the fundamental interconnectedness of all experience. Your healing doesn't just heal you, it sends ripples through the quantum field of consciousness, potentially healing others who are entangled with similar frequencies. When you transform your relationship with fear, you make it easier for everyone in your family system to transform theirs. When you learn to love yourself unconditionally, you broadcast that frequency into the collective field, making self-love more accessible to others. This is why your personal healing work is never purely personal. You're not just working with your individual nervous system, you're working with the quantum field of consciousness itself. Every moment of genuine healing, every authentic expression of truth, every act of courage in the face of old conditioning sends quantum information through the entangled web of consciousness, updating the field for everyone connected to similar frequencies. The key to working with emotional entanglement is learning to recognize when you're responding to present circumstances versus when you're responding to entangled past experiences. This requires developing what might be called quantum awareness, the ability to sense when your emotional response is proportional to the current situation versus when it's amplified by quantum entanglements with unresolved experiences. When your response feels bigger than the moment, when your emotional reaction surprises even you with its intensity, when you find yourself saying, "I don't know why I'm so upset about this." These are signs that quantum entanglement is collapsing past experiences into present reality. In these moments, you have a choice. You can react from the entangled pattern, reinforcing it and sending it deeper into your quantum field, or you can recognize what's happening and respond with conscious awareness, beginning the process of quantum decoherence that will eventually free you from the pattern. You are entangled with every moment that shaped you. But entanglement is not entrapment, it's connection. And connection can be healed. In chaos theory, there exists a beautiful and mysterious phenomenon called a strange attractor, a point in mathematical space that draws all nearby trajectories toward itself, creating patterns that appear random, but are actually following hidden rules of organization. No matter where a system starts, if it's within the attractor's field of influence, it will inevitably spiral toward that central organizing principle, creating patterns that are both unpredictable and strangely familiar. Your unresolved emotional states work exactly like strange attractors in the quantum field of your experience. They create invisible gravitational fields that draw certain types of people, situations, and circumstances into your reality with mathematical precision. Your unresolved grief has gravity. Your unhealed anger creates a magnetic field. Your unexpressed joy generates an attractor field that pulls experiences toward you that either allow its expression or frustrate its emergence. Think about the last 5 conflicts you've had with people who matter to you. Strip away the surface details, the specific words spoken, the particular circumstances, the unique personalities involved. What remains is the strange attractor at work. Perhaps it's the attractor of love equals struggle, drawing you repeatedly into relationships where affection must be fought for, earned through suffering, proven through endurance. Or perhaps it's the attractor of my voice doesn't matter, magnetizing situations where you feel unheard, overlooked, diminished. The mathematics of attractors reveals why changing surface behaviors often fails to create lasting transformation. You can modify your actions, your words, your conscious choices, but if the underlying attractor field remains unchanged, the system will inevitably spiral back toward the same patterns. The attractor exists at a deeper level than behavior. It exists at the level of energetic frequency. Consider Maria, whose childhood was shaped by a mother who loved dramatically. Intense affection followed by explosive anger, passionate connection followed by cold withdrawal. Maria's nervous system learned to equate intensity with love, creating an attractor field for turbulent relationships. Now, at 32, she finds herself repeatedly drawn to partners who love like storms, passionate, unpredictable, exhausting. When she dates someone steady and consistent, her attractor field interprets this as not love and creates boredom, restlessness, a sense that something essential is missing. The attractor field doesn't just influence who you're drawn to, it influences who's drawn to you. You're broadcasting an energetic signature that says, I'm available for this type of experience, and others with complementary attractor fields respond to that broadcast. The person whose attractor field is, I must rescue others to feel valuable, will inevitably encounter someone whose attractor field is, I need rescuing but will resent my rescuer. The dance begins before conscious choice ever enters the picture. This explains why geographical changes often fail to create psychological transformation. You can move across the country, change careers, even change your name, but your attractor fields move with you. Within months, you find yourself in the same type of job conflicts, the same type of friendship dramas, the same type of financial struggles. The locations change, the faces change, but the underlying patterns remain because the attractor fields that create those patterns remain unchanged. But here's where the science becomes hopeful. Attractor fields can be changed. In chaos theory, this is called a bifurcation point, a moment when a small change in conditions can completely reorganize the entire system around a new attractor. For emotional attractor fields, bifurcation happens when you bring sufficient consciousness to bear on unconscious patterns. When you can feel the gravitational pull of your familiar emotional territory and choose to respond differently, you begin to weaken the old attractor and strengthen the emerging new one. The transition between attractor fields isn't comfortable. There's a period of chaos, of not knowing which way the system will organize itself. You might find yourself feeling lost, uncertain, as if you don't know who you are anymore. This isn't a sign that something's wrong, it's a sign that transformation is happening. The old attractor field is losing its gravitational pull, but the new one hasn't yet become stable. You're in the space between stories, between identities, between ways of being in the world. During this transition period, you might notice that your usual coping strategies stop working. The people who used to be attracted to you seem less interested, while new types of people begin appearing in your life. Opportunities that would have excited you before now feel empty or irrelevant. Situations that would have triggered your familiar emotional responses now feel neutral or even boring. This is the attractor field recalibrating, seeking a new point of stability. The key to successfully navigating this transition is understanding that you're not losing yourself, you're discovering yourself. The chaos isn't destruction, it's reorganization. The old attractor field was never your true nature. It was a pattern of organization that served you once but has outlived its usefulness. As it dissolves, what emerges is more authentic, more aligned with who you're becoming rather than who you learn to be. Some attractor fields are personal, created by your individual history of experiences. Others are transpersonal, inherited from family systems or cultural conditioning. The strongest attractor fields often combine both, your personal nervous system entangled with ancestral patterns and collective unconscious themes. Transforming these deep attractors requires patience, persistence, and often support from others who have successfully navigated similar transitions. As you begin to recognize your emotional attractor fields, you start to see your life with new eyes. Those weren't random coincidences or streaks of bad luck. They were the precise mathematical result of your attractor fields organizing reality around unresolved emotional frequencies. And just as surely as those fields created your past experiences, consciously evolving them will create your future ones. The same principles that once seemed to work against you will begin working for you, drawing experiences that support your highest evolution rather than repeat your deepest wounds. Your unresolved emotions have gravity. Change the attractor field and watch your entire reality reorganize around new possibilities. Every time you recall a memory, neuroscientists have discovered something remarkable. You're not just remembering it, you're rewriting it. The act of remembering opens the neural pathway, making it plastic and malleable, susceptible to change based on your current emotional state and level of consciousness. This process, called memory reconsolidation, means that the past is not fixed, it's constantly being updated by your present moment awareness. But there's something even more profound at work here. Your emotional states don't just influence how you remember the past, they influence how you perceive the present and create the future. Each emotional experience becomes part of a vast feedback loop where your internal state shapes your external reality, which then feeds back to reinforce or challenge your internal state. It's an endless conversation between consciousness and experience, between observer and observed, between who you are and what you attract. Consider how this feedback loop operates in your daily life. You wake up carrying the emotional residue of yesterday's disappointments. This residue colors how you interpret your partner's morning silence, not as tiredness or preoccupation, but as evidence of growing distance. Your interpretation triggers anxiety, which changes your behavior. You become more clingy or more withdrawn, more aggressive or more passive. Your changed behavior elicits a response from your partner that seems to confirm your original fear. The feedback loop completes itself, and your emotional state has successfully created evidence for its own accuracy. Neuroscience reveals that emotional memories are stored not as static files, but as dynamic patterns of neural activation. Each time these patterns fire, they strengthen certain pathways while weakening others. Your emotional feedback loops literally reshape your brain, creating superhighways for familiar feelings and dead ends for unfamiliar ones. This is why positive thinking alone cannot transform emotional patterns. You cannot think your way out of a feedback loop that operates primarily through feeling and sensation. Your nervous system processes emotional reality faster than your conscious mind can intervene. By the time you're aware of feeling angry or afraid or sad, the feedback loop has already begun its cycle. sending signals through your body that change your posture, your breathing, your facial expressions, your energy field. Others respond to these unconscious signals before they respond to your words. They feel your anxiety and become anxious themselves, or they sense your anger and become defensive, or they detect your sadness and either move toward comfort or away from discomfort. Their responses feed back into your system as confirmation of your emotional state. If you're broadcasting unworthiness, people treat you as unworthy. If you're emanating fear, people either try to protect you or avoid you. If you're radiating love, people open their hearts. The feedback loop explains why transformation often feels impossible from inside the pattern. When you're depressed, everything looks hopeless, and everything you perceive as hopeless feeds your depression. When you're anxious, everything seems dangerous, and every danger you perceive amplifies your anxiety. When you're angry, everyone seems to be against you, and every opposition you encounter justifies your anger. The emotional state creates the perceptual filter that creates the reality that reinforces the emotional state. Breaking free from limiting feedback loops requires what might be called emotional courage, the willingness to feel what you've been avoiding. Until you feel it fully, you can't free it. Most of us have learned to manage our difficult emotions rather than experience them completely. We distract ourselves, numb ourselves, analyze ourselves out of feeling, or project our feelings onto others. But managed emotions don't transform. They just go underground, continuing to run their feedback loops from the basement of consciousness. Complete feeling is different from endless feeling. You don't need to wallow in an emotion for years to process it fully, but you do need to be willing to experience it without immediately trying to fix it, change it, or make it go away. When you can stay present with an emotion without resistance, something remarkable happens. It completes its natural cycle and transforms into something else. Anger becomes clarity, sadness becomes compassion, fear becomes excitement, shame becomes humility. This is where the feedback loop becomes a tool for transformation rather than repetition. As you learn to feel your emotions completely, they stop running you and start informing you. Instead of broadcasting unconscious emotional states that attract confirming experiences, you begin broadcasting conscious emotional frequencies that attract growth-supporting experiences. Your internal transformation creates external transformation, which feeds back to support further internal transformation. The transformation isn't linear. Feedback loops spiral rather than progress in straight lines. You might feel like you're making progress, then encounter a situation that activates an old pattern with surprising intensity. This isn't regression. It's the spiral bringing you back to familiar territory at a higher level of consciousness. Each time you meet an old pattern with new awareness, you weaken its gravitational pull and strengthen your capacity to choose a different response. The most powerful feedback loops are often the most subtle. They operate through micro-expressions, energy fields, unconscious assumptions, and expectations so familiar they've become invisible. Learning to recognize these subtle loops requires developing extraordinary sensitivity to your own internal states and their effects on others. It requires becoming curious about the gap between your conscious intentions and your unconscious emanations. As you become more conscious of your feedback loops, you begin to understand that you're not separate from your environment. You're in constant conversation with it. Your emotional state is both a response to reality and a creator of reality. This understanding brings both responsibility and empowerment. You realize that your inner work is your outer work, that healing yourself is healing the world, that transforming your consciousness is transforming your experience of life. Until you feel it fully, you can't free it. The loop that imprisons can become the spiral that liberates. In quantum physics, the observer effect reveals that the very act of observation changes what is being observed. A photon exists in a state of infinite possibility until the moment it's measured, at which point the wave function collapses into a single definite reality. The photon chooses how to behave based on how it's being observed. This suggests that consciousness and reality are not separate phenomena. They're intimately entangled, constantly influencing each other in ways that challenge our assumptions about the nature of existence itself. Your emotional patterns follow the same principle. They exist in a superposition of possible states until the moment you observe them clearly, at which point they collapse into specific experiences. But here's the crucial insight. Different qualities of observation create different realities. Observing your anger with judgment and resistance creates one reality. Observing the same anger with curiosity and compassion creates an entirely different reality. Most of the time, you're not really observing your emotional states. You're being overwhelmed by them. There's a difference between being inside an emotion and witnessing an emotion. When you're inside it, you become it. Your identity merges with the feeling, and you lose the capacity to choose how to respond. But when you can step into witness consciousness, that part of you that can observe your thoughts, feelings, and reactions without being consumed by them, something remarkable becomes possible. Choice. Healing starts when observation replaces avoidance. For years, perhaps decades, you've been avoiding certain emotional territories because they feel too dangerous, too overwhelming, too threatening to your sense of self. But avoidance doesn't make emotions disappear. It makes them unconscious. And unconscious emotions run your life from the shadows, creating patterns you don't understand and attracting experiences you don't want. Neuroscience confirms that conscious observation activates the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for executive function and emotional regulation. When you observe your emotions with awareness rather than reactivity, you literally change your brain's response patterns, creating new neural pathways that support conscious choice over automatic reaction. The quality of your observation determines the quality of your transformation. Observing your sadness with the thought, "I shouldn't feel this way," creates resistance, which locks the sadness in place. Observing the same sadness with the thought, "This sadness has something to teach me," creates spaciousness, which allows the sadness to move and transform. Observing with the thought, "I am this sadness," creates identification, which traps you inside the feeling. Observing with the awareness, "I am the one who can witness this sadness," creates freedom. Let's practice this for a moment. Think of an emotion you've been avoiding, perhaps anxiety about your future, grief about a loss, anger about an injustice, or shame about a perceived failure. Instead of thinking about this emotion, see if you can feel it in your body right now. Where does it live? How does it express itself through sensation? What is its texture, its temperature, its quality of movement or stillness? Notice what happens when you bring gentle, curious attention to this feeling. You might discover that it's not as overwhelming as you expected. You might find that it has layers, surface agitation covering deeper sadness, or apparent anger revealing underlying fear. You might notice that the feeling actually wants to move, to access itself, to be heard and acknowledged. This is the observer effect in action. Your conscious attention is already beginning to transform the emotion, but observation is not passive. True witnessing is an act of love, of inclusion, of radical acceptance. It's saying to your difficult emotions, "I see you, I acknowledge you, you're allowed to be here. You don't have to hide or pretend to be something else. I'm willing to learn what you have to teach me." This quality of loving observation creates the safety necessary for transformation. The observer effect reveals why healing cannot be forced. You cannot strong-arm your way out of emotional patterns any more than you can strong-arm a photon into behaving the way you want it to. Transformation happens through invitation, not coercion. When you create the right conditions, loving attention, patient observation, compassionate presence, your emotions naturally evolve toward greater coherence and integration. Some emotions have been waiting years or even decades for this quality of attention. They've been trying to get your notice through symptoms, through repetitive patterns, through the very experiences you've been trying to avoid. When you finally turn toward them with conscious awareness, they often dissolve or transform with surprising rapidity. What seemed like immovable psychological material reveals itself to be energy that was simply longing to be seen. The observer effect also applies to your habitual thoughts and beliefs. Many of the same thoughts you think are yours are actually inherited from family, culture, or past versions of yourself. But when you begin to observe your thoughts rather than believing them automatically, you create space between the observer and the observed. In that space, choice becomes possible. You can decide which thoughts serve your evolution and which ones keep you trapped in old patterns. This is why meditation and mindfulness practices are so transformative, not because they relax you, though they often do, but because they train you in the art of conscious observation. They teach you how to witness your inner experience without being overwhelmed by it, how to remain present with whatever arises without immediately trying to fix or change it. This capacity for loving observation is perhaps the most practical spiritual skill you can develop. As your capacity for observation deepens, you begin to notice that you are not your emotions, you are not your thoughts, you are not your patterns. You are the consciousness that can witness all of these phenomena. And from that place of witness consciousness, you have access to choice, to creativity, to responses that arise from wisdom rather than reactivity. The observer effect becomes a doorway to freedom, not freedom from your humanity, but freedom within it. Healing starts when observation replaces avoidance. You are not your emotions, you are the loving awareness that can witness them. In quantum physics, coherence describes a state where wave functions are perfectly synchronized, creating patterns of extraordinary stability and power. Laser light achieves its intensity through coherence, millions of photons vibrating in perfect unison, their individual waves combining to create something far more powerful than the sum of their parts. But coherence can also trap systems in rigid patterns, preventing the flexibility necessary for evolution and growth. Your emotional patterns achieve their persistence through a kind of psychological coherence. Trauma creates coherent patterns where thoughts, feelings, sensations, and behaviors lock into synchronized cycles that repeat with remarkable consistency. The abused child develops a coherent pattern of hypervigilance where every system, nervous, emotional, cognitive, behavioral, aligns around the expectation of danger. This coherence serves survival, but it can persist long after the original threat has passed. The same coherence that once protected you can become the prison that contains you. Your fear develops its own coherent intelligence, organizing your entire life around avoiding specific types of pain. Your shame creates coherent stories about your unworthiness that influence every relationship, every career choice, every moment of potential joy. Your anger maintains coherent vigilance against perceived injustices, keeping you perpetually ready for battle even when peace is possible. Breaking free from limiting patterns requires what quantum physicists call decoherence, the dissolution of rigid synchronization that allows new possibilities to emerge. In your emotional life, decoherence happens when you bring conscious awareness to unconscious patterns with such consistency and compassion that the pattern begins to lose its automatic, reflexive quality. The lockstep synchronization between trigger and response begins to loosen. Decoherence in psychological terms occurs when the various components of an emotional pattern, thoughts, feelings, sensations, behaviors, begin to operate independently rather than as a unified whole. This creates space for new responses to emerge, new neural pathways to form, new possibilities to crystallize into experience. The process of decoherence often feels uncomfortable because it involves the dissolution of familiar structures. Your coherent patterns, however limiting, provide a sense of predictability and control. Even if that control is the control of suffering, it's known suffering, and the nervous system often prefers known suffering to unknown possibility. As decoherence begins, you might feel uncertain, disoriented, as if you don't know who you are without your familiar patterns of reactivity. This is where surrender becomes essential. Decoherence cannot be forced, it must be allowed. It requires a quality of letting go that feels like dying to your old self. In many ways, it is a death. The version of you that was organized around old trauma, old fears, old limitations must die for a new version to be born. This death is not destruction, it's transformation, the way a caterpillar dies to become a butterfly. Watch what happens when you stop fighting your patterns and start observing them with loving curiosity. Notice how the very act of loving observation begins to create spaciousness around what once felt solid and immovable. The pattern is still there, but it's no longer running you with the same automatic intensity. You can feel the trigger arise and choose to respond differently. You can sense the familiar emotion and decide to stay present with it rather than being consumed by it. As decoherence deepens, something beautiful begins to emerge, your authentic self. Not the self that was organized around survival and protection, but the self that exists beneath all the patterns, all the conditioning, all the learned responses. This authentic self is naturally coherent, not with limiting patterns, but with love, with truth, with the creative intelligence that animates all of life. The transition from old coherence to new coherence passes through a phase of apparent chaos. This is natural and necessary. In quantum systems, decoherence often looks like disorder, but it's actually the system reorganizing itself around a higher level of organization. Your emotional decoherence might manifest as periods of confusion, emotional sensitivity, or feeling like you're falling apart. You're not falling apart, you're falling together in a new way. The final stage of this process is recoherence around your authentic nature. Instead of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors being organized around trauma and limitation, they begin to organize around love, creativity, and genuine expression. This new coherence feels different from the old. It's more flexible, more responsive, more alive. It serves growth rather than mere survival, expansion rather than mere protection. When coherence breaks, the loop dissolves. The repetitive patterns that once ran your life lose their automatic quality. You find yourself responding to familiar triggers with surprising calm. Situations that would have activated intense reactivity now feel neutral or even interesting. The people who used to push your buttons discover that your buttons have been disconnected. You're the same person, but you're operating from an entirely different level of consciousness. This transformation ripples outward, affecting everyone in your life. Your family system must recalibrate around your new frequency. Your intimate relationships either evolve to match your growth or naturally complete. Your work becomes an expression of your authentic gifts rather than a compromise with your limitations. Your entire reality reorganizes itself around the new coherence you've achieved. The most profound recognition comes in moments of quiet surrender, when you realize that you were never broken, never damaged beyond repair, never doomed to repeat the same patterns forever. You were simply coherent around the wrong organizing principle. The capacity for transformation was always present, waiting for the right conditions to emerge. Those conditions are not complex: loving awareness, patient observation, and the courage to let who you've been die into who you're becoming. When coherence breaks, the loop dissolves. In the space between who you were and who you're becoming, infinite possibility awaits. There comes a moment in every transformation when the old self begins to dissolve. Not the forced dissolution of self-rejection or spiritual bypassing, but the organic collapse that happens when you finally stop maintaining patterns that no longer serve you. It's like a wave that has traveled across an entire ocean, carrying the same shape, the same energy, the same momentum for so long that it seems eternal, until it reaches the shore and discovers that its waveness was always temporary, its true nature always the vast, formless sea. You're witnessing the collapse of your own wave function, the identity you've carried, built from layers of experiences and responses and survival strategies, is beginning to dissolve back into pure potential. This isn't death, it's birth. It's the recognition that who you thought you were was always just one possibility among infinite possibilities, and now those possibilities are opening up again. Every choice you make differently changes the field. Each moment you respond with awareness. Instead of reactivity, you weaken the coherence of old patterns and strengthen new ones. When you feel the familiar trigger arise, that sensation in your chest that used to automatically generate anger or fear or shame, and you pause, breathe, and choose curiosity over reactivity, you're literally collapsing the quantum wave that wanted to recreate the same experience you've had 1,000 times before. The collapse of the wave is not violent. It's gentle, inevitable, like snow melting in spring. The patterns that once felt so solid, so immutable, so definitively you begin to soften around the edges. You notice space where once there was only reaction. You discover choice where once there was only compulsion. This process can be disorienting because so much of your sense of self has been built around these patterns. Who are you if you're not the one who gets anxious about money? Who are you if you're not the one who struggles with intimacy? Who are you if you're not the one carrying the particular cocktail of wounds and compensations that has defined your personality for decades? The collapse of the wave reveals that these were never your true identity. They were just the shape you took in response to your circumstances. Underneath the wave is the ocean. Underneath the pattern is pure consciousness. Underneath the reactive self is the authentic self. Not another personality, not another set of characteristics, but the aware presence that has been witnessing all your experiences, all your transformations, all your becomings and unbecomings. This presence doesn't collapse because it was never a wave to begin with. It's the unchanging awareness within which all waves arise and dissolve. The collapse happens gradually, then suddenly. For months or years, you work consciously with your patterns, observing them, understanding them, choosing differently. The changes feel incremental, sometimes barely perceptible. Then one day you realize that something fundamental has shifted. The trigger that used to send you into reactivity for hours now feels neutral, even boring. The person who used to activate your deepest wounds now seems like a stranger from another lifetime. The situation that used to fill you with anxiety now feels manageable, even interesting. This is quantum transformation, not linear healing, but sudden phase transitions where everything reorganizes around a new level of coherence. Like water suddenly becoming ice or steam, your consciousness has reached a tipping point where the old organization becomes impossible and the new organization becomes inevitable. You haven't added anything to yourself, you've simply stopped maintaining what was never really you to begin with. The collapse of the wave often coincides with what mystics call the dark night of the soul, a period where your old coping mechanisms stop working, but your new capacities haven't yet stabilized. You might feel lost, uncertain, as if you're floating in space without reference points. This is natural and necessary. The space between identities is sacred space pregnant with infinite possibility. Stay here, breathe here, trust the process of dissolution. In quantum physics, the collapse of the wave function is how reality emerges from possibility. In your emotional life, the collapse of old patterns is how your authentic nature emerges from the accumulated layers of conditioning. What collapses is not real. It was just the shape you took when you didn't know you had other options. What emerges is what was always real, the consciousness that can witness, choose, love, and create from a place of freedom rather than compulsion. You may find yourself grieving during this collapse. This too is natural. Even patterns that limited you also provided identity, predictability, a sense of knowing who you were in the world. As they dissolve, part of you may feel like you're losing yourself. You're not losing yourself. You're losing your false self. But the false self, however limiting, has been your companion for a long time. It's okay to feel sadness as you let it go, gratitude for how it tried to protect you, and excitement for what wants to emerge in its place. The collapse creates space for the new coherence to emerge. Like a forest fire that clears out undergrowth so new trees can grow, the dissolution of old patterns makes room for new ways of being that are more aligned with your essential nature. You're not becoming someone else, you're becoming more yourself than you've ever been. The wave was just a temporary form, the ocean is eternal. Every choice you make differently changes the field. In the collapse of the wave, infinite possibility is born. A violin string, when plucked, naturally resonates at a specific frequency, but that frequency can be changed by adjusting the tension, the length, the thickness of the string. Your emotional field operates on the same principle. You've been resonating at particular frequencies, fear, anger, sadness, joy, based on the tuning you received through your early experiences. But just as a violin can be retuned, your emotional frequency can be consciously adjusted to resonate with states that serve your highest evolution. Rewriting your frequency is not about positive thinking or affirmations, though these can be helpful tools. It's about actually shifting the vibrational quality of your nervous system, the energetic signature you broadcast into the quantum field of experience. This happens through embodied practice, through literally feeling your way into new frequencies until they become more familiar than the old ones. The process begins with awareness of your current frequency. Right now, as you read these words, what is the quality of your inner experience? Is there an undertone of anxiety, a background hum of sadness, a subtle vibration of anger or excitement or peace? Most people are unconscious of their baseline frequency because it's been so constant for too long that it feels like the natural state of being human. But it's not natural, it's learned, and what's learned can be unlearned. Close your eyes for a moment and feel into the space beyond reaction. Imagine that beneath all your thoughts, all your emotions, all your sensations, there's a field of pure awareness. This awareness isn't anxious or sad or angry, it simply is. It's the screen upon which all experiences play, but it remains unchanged by what appears upon it. Can you feel that stillness, that spaciousness? That's your true frequency, not empty but full of potential. From this space of awareness, you can begin to consciously choose what frequency you want to cultivate. Not by forcing or pretending, but by gently attuning your nervous system to frequencies that are more aligned with your authentic nature. Love has a frequency, peace has a frequency, joy, compassion, creativity, gratitude. Each has its own vibrational signature that you can learn to recognize and embody. The retuning process works through resonance. just as a tuning fork will cause nearby objects to vibrate at the same frequency, exposing yourself to higher frequencies through music, nature, meditation, loving relationships, creative expression, gradually entrains your own system to resonate at those frequencies. This is why certain people, places, and activities feel so nourishing while others feel draining. You're responding to their vibrational quality. But here's the beautiful paradox. The frequencies you're seeking to cultivate, love, peace, joy, are not foreign to you. They're your natural state, temporarily obscured by the frequencies of survival and protection that you learned in response to challenging circumstances. Retuning isn't about adding something new. It's about removing the interference patterns that have been drowning out your authentic frequency. The interference patterns are the unresolved emotions, the limiting beliefs, the unconscious contractions that keep your system locked into defensive frequencies. As you heal these patterns, not by fighting them, but by meeting them with awareness and compassion, your natural frequency begins to emerge. It's like cleaning the dust off a crystal so it can shine with its true brilliance. Rewriting your frequency affects everything. The people who are attracted to you begin to change because you're broadcasting a different signal. The opportunities that come into your life shift because you're resonating with different possibilities. The way you perceive and interpret experiences transforms because you're filtering reality through a different vibrational lens. Your outer world reorganizes itself to match your inner frequency. This is not magical thinking, it's quantum mechanics applied to consciousness. In the quantum field, like frequencies attract and reinforce each other, while opposing frequencies cancel each other out. When you consistently embody love, you attract more love. When you resonate with peace, you create more peaceful experiences. When you vibrate with gratitude, you magnetize more experiences that generate genuine appreciation. Practice this. Think of a quality you want to cultivate, perhaps compassion. Instead of thinking about compassion, feel it in your body. Where does compassion live? How does it express itself through your breath, your posture, your facial expression? Spend a few minutes embodying this quality, not as performance, but as authentic exploration. Notice how different this feels from your habitual emotional state. The retuning process requires patience because you're working with deep neurological and energetic patterns that have been reinforced for years or decades. The old frequency will still arise, perhaps frequently at first, but each time you choose to return to your desired frequency, you strengthen that pathway. Eventually, the new frequency becomes more familiar, more natural, more automatic than the old one. Some frequencies are easier to access than others, depending on your history and natural temperament. If you experienced a lot of love as a child, tuning into love may feel natural and accessible. If you experienced more fear, love might initially feel foreign or unsafe. This is why the healing work, resolving the interference patterns, is so important. You can't sustain a frequency that your nervous system perceives as dangerous. The ultimate goal is not to maintain one frequency all the time. That would be as limiting as being stuck in fear or anger. The goal is to develop frequency flexibility, the ability to naturally resonate with whatever frequency serves the moment, while always being able to return to your baseline of peaceful awareness. This is emotional mastery, not the suppression of feeling, but the conscious cultivation of frequencies that support your highest expression. As your frequency stabilizes around love, peace, and authentic expression, you become a tuning fork for others. Your presence alone begins to help other people remember their own natural frequencies. Without saying a word, without trying to fix or change anyone, you offer them the gift of resonance with their own higher possibilities. This is how consciousness evolves, not through force or persuasion, but through vibrational invitation. Feel the space beyond reaction. In that spaciousness, you can choose your frequency as consciously as a musician tunes their instrument. There's a moment when the mirror shatters, not the physical mirrors that reflect your face, but the psychic mirrors that have been reflecting your wounds back to you for years or decades. The mirror of projection, where everyone in your life seemed to carry the same frustrating qualities. The mirror of repetition, where every new situation somehow recreated familiar patterns of pain. The mirror of limitation, where your reflection always seemed to confirm your deepest fears about yourself. The breaking doesn't happen through force or willpower. You can't shatter these mirrors by fighting them any more than you can break your reflection by hitting the glass. The breaking happens through recognition, the sudden, crystal clear seeing that what you've been struggling against was never outside you to begin with. The difficult people, the challenging circumstances, The repetitive patterns were all reflections of unresolved energy within your own consciousness. And then, in a moment of grace that feels both surprising and inevitable, you see through the illusion. The person who has been triggering your anger for months suddenly seems different, not because they've changed, but because you're no longer carrying the internal charge that created the resonance. The situation that felt impossible to resolve simply dissolves because you're no longer feeding it with reactive energy. The pattern that seemed so solid and immutable reveals itself to have been made of nothing more substantial than your own unexamined beliefs. This recognition often comes with a rush of emotion, laughter at the cosmic joke of it all, tears of relief at finally being free, a profound sense of compassion for how hard you've been working to solve problems that existed only in the hall of mirrors of your own conditioning. You might find yourself crying and laughing simultaneously, your nervous system releasing years of accumulated tension in waves of cathartic expression. You are not the echo, you are the silence beneath it. You are not the reflection, you are the awareness that can witness all reflections without being defined by any of them. You are not the pattern, you are the space in which all patterns arise and dissolve. The breaking of the mirror is often preceded by a period of intense pressure, as if life is testing your commitment to the old patterns one final time. The familiar triggers might arise with unusual intensity. Old wounds might surface for what feels like the 100th time. You might feel tempted to fall back into reactive patterns, to prove to yourself that nothing has really changed, that transformation is just another spiritual fantasy. But something is different this time. Even in the midst of the intensity, there's a witness presence that remains untouched by the drama. You can feel the trigger arising and simultaneously feel the space around it. You can experience the emotion and simultaneously know that you are larger than the emotion. This dual awareness, being in the experience while simultaneously transcending it, is the crack that allows the mirror to finally shatter. When the mirror breaks, you realize that freedom was always available. Not the freedom to control your circumstances, but the freedom to choose your response to circumstances. Not the freedom to avoid difficult emotions, but the freedom to experience them without being overwhelmed. Not the freedom to escape your humanity, but the freedom to embrace it from a place of loving awareness rather than defensive reactivity. The shards of the broken mirror become doorways. Each piece that once reflected limitation now reflects a different aspect of your infinite nature. The person who used to trigger your anger now reflects your capacity for patience. The situation that used to generate fear now reflects your courage. The pattern that used to feel like prison now reflects the very mechanism through which you discovered your freedom. There's often a period of disorientation after the mirror breaks. The world looks the same but feels completely different. People are the same people, but your experience of them has fundamentally shifted. Problems still exist, but they no longer have the power to define your inner state. Challenges still arise, but they feel like waves on the ocean of your being rather than tsunamis that threaten to drown you. Some people in your life may not understand the change. They may try to engage you in the old patterns, to pull you back into familiar dynamics of drama and reactivity. But you can't unsee what you've seen, can't unknow what you now know. The mirror, once broken, cannot be put back together. You might feel compassion for their attempts to recreate the familiar dance, but you can no longer participate with the same unconscious investment. The breaking of the mirror is not a one-time event, but a series of shattering recognitions that happen at deeper and deeper levels. Each time you see through another layer of illusion, another mirror breaks. Each time you recognize another projection, another reflection dissolves. The process continues until you realize that you were never trapped by circumstances. You are only trapped by your interpretation of circumstances. What emerges from the broken mirror is not a new personality, but your original face. The awareness that was present before you learned to see yourself through the distorted reflections of trauma and conditioning. This awareness is naturally peaceful, naturally loving, naturally free. It doesn't need to be improved or fixed or healed. It simply needs to be recognized and embodied. The laughter and tears that often accompany the breaking are not just emotional release, they're the sound of truth recognizing itself. The laughter says, "Of course, how could I have missed something so obvious?" The tears say, "Finally, I can stop carrying what was never mine to carry." Together, they celebrate the end of a long journey home to yourself. In the silence that follows the breaking, you hear something you may have never heard before, the sound of your own authentic being, no longer filtered through the distortions of projection and reactivity. It's not loud or dramatic. It's quiet, steady, infinitely spacious. It's the silence that was always there beneath the echo, the stillness that was always present beneath the movement, the peace that was always available beneath the struggle. You are not the echo, you are the silence beneath it. In the breaking of the mirror, you discover what was never broken. In quantum physics, there exists something called the zero-point field, a state of minimum energy that pervades all of space, even in the complete absence of matter and electromagnetic radiation. It's not empty nothingness, but pregnant stillness, a field of pure potential from which all possibilities emerge. This zero-point field is not passive or static, it's dynamically alive, constantly fluctuating with virtual particles that appear and disappear in quantum foam, yet maintaining perfect equilibrium. There is a zero-point field within consciousness as well, a still point that exists beneath all movement, beneath all emotion, beneath all thought. It's not the absence of experience, but the presence that witnesses all experience. It's not numbness or detachment, but a live stillness, aware emptiness, conscious peace. This still point is your true home, the place you've been trying to return to through all your seeking, all your healing, all your attempts to resolve the echoes of unfinished business. Serenity is not a state you achieve, it's a state you remember. It's not something you create through effort, but something you uncover by removing what obscures it. Like the sky that's always blue even when covered by clouds, the still point is always present even when hidden by the movement of thoughts and emotions. In stillness, loops unravel naturally, not because you've fixed them, but because you've found the place where they never existed to begin with. The still point is not separate from activity. It's the center of the wheel around which all movement revolves. From this place you can engage fully with life while remaining anchored in peace. You can feel deeply while maintaining equanimity. You can care passionately while holding everything lightly. Finding the still point is simpler than you might imagine, but it requires a fundamental shift in how you approach experience. Instead of trying to manage or control your thoughts and emotions, you learn to find the awareness that observes them. Instead of fighting against the movement of life, you discover the stillness that contains all the movement. Instead of seeking peace in the future, you recognize the peace that's available right now, in this moment, regardless of what's happening. Rest your attention on your breath for a moment, not controlling it, not changing it, just witnessing the natural rhythm of inhalation and exhalation. Now shift your attention to the brief pause between breaths, that moment of stillness between the in-breath and the out-breath. In that pause, can you sense the stillness that's always present? That's a taste of the still point. The still point is beyond polarity. It's not calm versus agitated, peaceful versus disturbed, good versus bad. It's the space in which all polarities arise and are witnessed without preference. From this place you can experience anger without being angry, sadness without being sad, joy without being attached to joy. The emotions move through the field of awareness like weather patterns through the sky, natural and temporary expressions of life's infinite creativity. This doesn't mean you become emotionless or detached. Paradoxically, from the still point, you can feel more deeply because you're not afraid of being overwhelmed by feeling. You can love more fully because you're not afraid of loss. You can engage more completely because you're not afraid of outcomes. The stillness provides the safety that allows complete experiencing without complete identification. Living from the still point transforms your relationship with time. The anxious rushing toward future goals and the depressive dwelling on past mistakes both dissolve into presence. Not the forced presence of spiritual practice, but the natural presence that arises when you're no longer trying to be somewhere else. You discover that all of life is happening now, and now is where the still point lives. The still point is also the point of greatest creative potential. Like the quantum zero-point field from which particles spontaneously emerge, the inner still point is the source of spontaneous wisdom, compassion, and appropriate action. When you're anchored in stillness, your responses arise not from reaction or conditioning, but from the intelligence of the moment itself. You find yourself knowing what to say, how to act, when to move and when to wait, without having to figure it out mentally. Others can feel when you're operating from the still point. Your presence becomes a field of peace that affects everyone around you. Not because you're trying to calm them, but because stillness is contagious in the same way that anxiety is contagious. Your nervous system, settled into its natural rhythm, helps other nervous systems remember their own natural rhythm. This is how healing spreads, not through words or actions, but through embodied presence. The journey to the still point often involves periods of intense movement. Like a washing machine that spins faster and faster before coming to rest, your consciousness might go through phases of accelerated processing, rapid emotional release, intense insights, and dramatic life changes before settling into deeper stillness. This is natural. The movement isn't a deviation from stillness. It's the stillness organizing itself into greater coherence. You don't have to maintain the still point. It maintains you. You don't have to create peace. You have to stop creating disturbance. The peace is already there, has always been there, will always be there. It's not dependent on circumstances, not conditional on your behavior, not contingent on your worthiness. It's your birthright, your true nature, the ground of your being. From the still point, your entire life becomes a meditation, not in the formal sense of sitting quietly, but in the deeper sense of remaining present and aware regardless of what's arising. Work becomes meditation. Relationships become meditation. Even conflict and challenge become meditation. Opportunities to practice returning to stillness in the midst of movement, finding peace in the heart of apparent chaos. The still point is not an achievement, but a recognition. You don't arrive at it, you realize you've never left it. Beneath all the seeking, all the struggling, all the patterns and echoes and loops, this stillness has been your constant companion, your unchanging essence, your eternal home. In stillness, everything resolves not because problems are solved, but because the one who had problems is recognized to be a temporary movement in the eternal dance of consciousness knowing itself. In stillness, loops unravel. At the still point, you discover that peace is not something you find or impose. It's something you are. You wake up and something is different. Not dramatically, not obviously, but in the way morning light feels softer, in the way your breath moves more freely, in the way the weight in your chest, that familiar weight that has been your companion for so long, has dissolved into spaciousness. You're the same person who went to sleep last night, but you're operating from an entirely different center of gravity. Remember that first chapter, when we talked about déjà vu days, about waking up wondering why the same feeling followed you everywhere. The feeling is still there, but it's transformed. What once felt heavy now feels light. What once felt like a problem now feels like presence. What once felt like a prison now feels like the infinite space in which all experiences arise and dissolve. The people in your life are the same people, but the mirrors between you have been replaced by windows. You can see them clearly now, not as projections of your own unfinished business, but as fellow travelers on their own unique journeys. The ones who used to trigger your deepest reactions now evoke curiosity or compassion. The ones who used to drain your energy now seem neutral or even interesting. You're no longer available for the old dramas because you're no longer carrying the unresolved frequencies that those dramas were trying to resolve. Your relationship with repetition has fundamentally shifted. You still notice patterns in yourself, in others, in the world, but they no longer feel like traps. They feel like information, like the natural rhythms of consciousness exploring itself through infinite variations. When you do fall into an old pattern, which sometimes still happens, you can observe it with gentle amusement rather than self-judgment. You've learned to treat your human conditioning the way you'd treat a child learning how to walk, with patience, compassion, and trust in the natural process of growth. The echo has been transformed from curse to blessing. What once repeated as pain now repeats as wisdom. What once cycled as wound now cycles as gift. The same sensitivity that made you vulnerable to hurt now makes you exquisitely available to love. Your work, whatever it is, has become an expression of your authentic nature rather than a compromise with your limitations. Not because you necessarily change careers, though you might have, but because you're bringing a different quality of presence to whatever you do. You're no longer trying to prove yourself or hide yourself. You're simply offering your unique gifts to the world, trusting that the right opportunities will magnetize to your authentic frequency. Money flows differently too, not necessarily more abundantly, though often that happens, but more naturally. You've stopped the unconscious patterns of scarcity and unworthiness that used to create artificial limitation. You've also stopped the desperate grasping that used to push abundance away. Resources come and go like tides, and you've learned to surf rather than drown, to trust rather than hoard, to give and receive with equal grace. Love feels different now, not more intense but more sustainable, not more dramatic but more real. Whether you're in relationship or single, you've stopped looking for someone else to complete you and started relating from completeness. You've stopped trying to heal others and started healing yourself. You've stopped needing to be needed and started wanting to be wanted. This transformation in your relationship with love ripples out to affect every human connection in your life. The most profound change is invisible to others, but unmistakable to you. You've fallen in love with your own existence. Not in a narcissistic way, but in the way you might fall in love with a sunset or a piece of music, with appreciation for the beauty and mystery of what is. You're no longer trying to fix yourself, improve yourself, or become someone else. You're curious about who you are, excited about what wants to emerge through you, grateful for the privilege of consciousness itself. Sometimes people ask you what changed, what you did differently, how you found peace. You try to explain about quantum entanglement and attractor fields and the observer effect, but the words feel inadequate. How do you describe water to someone who has only known thirst? How do you explain freedom to someone still caught in familiar cages? So you smile and say something simple. I stopped fighting what was already perfect, or I remembered who I was before I learned who I should be, or simply I learned to listen. You understand now that your journey was never about eliminating the echoes, but about transforming your relationship with them. The echoes are still there. Childhood wonder echoing through adult creativity, early heartbreak echoing as deeper capacity for love, ancient fear echoing as present moment courage. But they're no longer running you. They're informing you, inspiring you, reminding you of the incredible resilience and sensitivity of human consciousness. You've become a different kind of echo yourself, an echo of peace in a chaotic world, an echo of love in a frightened world, an echo of presence in a distracted world. Not because you're trying to be an example or make a difference, but because the transformation is naturally contagious. Your very existence has become a quiet invitation for others to remember their own wholeness. The loops have not disappeared. They have become spirals. Instead of circling back to the same point at the same level, your patterns now spiral upward, bringing you back to familiar territory with expanded awareness. Each return offers new insights, deeper integration, greater capacity for love and understanding. What felt like being stuck was actually the motion of evolution itself. Consciousness exploring every angle of experience before transcending to the next level. On quiet mornings like this one, you sometimes marvel at the journey. All that struggling, all that seeking, all that effort to change what couldn't be changed and control what couldn't be controlled, and yet every step was necessary, every detour was perfect, every apparent mistake was part of a larger intelligence orchestrating your awakening. You see now that you were never broken, never stuck, never lost. You were always exactly where you needed to be, learning what you needed to learn, becoming who you needed to become. The original tagline echoes back to you now with transformed meaning. What you avoid becomes the echo you relive until you listen. You've learned to listen, not just with your ears, but with your whole being. You've learned to hear the wisdom in your wounds, the guidance in your pain, the love beneath your fear. You've learned that every echo was a call to come home to yourself. And here you are, finally home, not in a place but in a presence, not in circumstances but in consciousness, not in having everything you want but in wanting everything you have. The echo chamber has become a sanctuary. The quantum field has become your playground. The memory has become wisdom, and the wound has become the gift you offer to a world that is still learning to listen to its own echoes. What you avoid becomes the echo you relive until you listen, and when you finally listen, the echo transforms into song. The journey from repetition to transformation is complete. You have moved through recognition, revelation, and resolution. You have discovered that you are not the echo but the eternal listening, not the wave but the ocean, not the pattern but the consciousness in which all patterns arise and dissolve. May your echoes be blessings. May your patterns be poetry. May your quantum field be filled with love.